There is this verse in the Bible, Revelation 21:16, that says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his people. God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the first things have passed away.' And the one who was seated on the throne said, 'See, I am making all things new.' Also he said, 'Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true.' Then he said to me, 'It is done. I am Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end.'" This scripture was in a prophetic form, form of revelation to Apostle John. It is very, very detailed. But the essence of me having this session today is to talk about remaining awake through a great revolution. I don't need to pause to say how delighted I may be to be here this afternoon, to have an opportunity of standing in this very great and significant position of sharing with us. And I would like to use as a subject from which to share with us this afternoon, remaining awake through the Great Revolution. The text for this afternoon is found in the book of Revelation, as I've said earlier. "Behold, I make all things new. Former things have passed away." I am certain that most of us have read the arresting little story from the pen of an American, Washington Irving, that is titled Rip Van Winkle. The one thing that we usually remember about the story is that Rip Van Winkle slept for 20 years. The most striking thing about the story of Rip Van Winkle is not merely that he slept 20 years, but he was asleep through the revolution. While he was peacefully snoring up in the mountain, a revolution was taking place. At points would change the course of history. And Rip knew nothing about it. He was asleep. He was asleep. He slept through the revolution. And one of the great liabilities of life is that all too many people find themselves living amid a great period of social change, and yet they fail to develop the new attitudes, new mental responses that the new situations demand. They end up sleeping through the revolutions. Yes, we do live in a period where changes are taking place, and there is still the voice crying through the visitor of time, "Behold, I make all things new. Former things have passed away." Now, whenever anything new comes into history, it brings with it new challenges and new opportunities. First, we are challenged to develop the world perspective. No individual can live alone. No nation can live alone. And anyone who feels that he can live alone is sleeping through the revolution. The world in which we live today is geographically one. The challenge we face today is to make it one in terms of brotherhood. Through the scientific and the technological genius, we have made of this world a neighborhood, and yet we have not had the ethical commitment to make it to be a brotherhood. But somehow, in some way, we have got to do this. We must learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools, as once stated by Martin Luther King Jr. We are tied together in the single garment of destiny. The destiny is one, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. And whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are also what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. Secondly, friends and brothers, we are challenged to eradicate the last vestiges of racial injustice from our nation. I must say this afternoon that racial injustice is still the black man's burden and the white man's shame. In this context, it is also still the poor man's burden and the rich man's shame. It is an unhappy truth that racism, tribalism, ethnicity is a way of life for the vast majority of the whites, the rich, the poor, and the dynasties. Spoken and unspoken, acknowledged and denied, subtle and sometimes not so subtle, the disease of racism, ethnicity, tribalism permeates and poisons the whole body politic. And I can see nothing more urgent than for a humanity to work passionately and unrelentingly to get rid of this disease of racism, this disease of ethnicity, this disease of tribalism. Something positive must be done. Everyone must share the guilt as individuals and as institutions. The government must certainly share the guilt. Individuals must share the guilt. Even the church must also share the guilt. We must face the sad fact that the 11th o'clock on a Sunday, when we stand to sing in Christ, there is no east or west. We stand in the most segregated hour of our nations. There is another thing closely related to racism, and I would like to mention as another challenge. We are challenged to rid our nations and the world of poverty. Like monstrous octopus, poverty spreads its nagging, prehensile tentacles into hamlets and villages all over our world. 2/3 of the people of the world go to bed hungry. Tonight, they are ill-housed, they are They are ill-nourished, they are shabbily clad, and I have seen it in our societies. I have seen it in Africa. I have seen it in parts of the other continents. I have seen it in our nation. And I have also seen it across the other generations. Not only do we see poverty abroad, I would like to remind us that our own nation, that there is about 40 million or so people who are poverty stricken. I have seen them here. I have seen them elsewhere within the boundaries of our nation. I have seen them in the ghettos of the north, south, east, and in the streets of our towns. I have seen them in the rural areas of the south. I have seen them in uh, the villages within our country. And I have seen them across within Africa and across the world. I have just been in the process of touring many areas of our country. And I must confess that in some situations I have literally found myself almost crying. And the tragedy is so often these 40 plus million people are invisible because our nation is so affluent, so rich, because our expressway carry us from the ghetto. We don't see the poor. This is our nation's opportunity to help bridge the gulf between the haves and the have-nots. The question is whether our nation will do it. There is nothing about poverty. There's nothing new about it. What is new is that how have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty? The real question is whether we have the will. In a few weeks, some of us are coming to the national headquarters to see if we will still, the will is still alive, or if it is alive in this nation. We are coming to the city in a poor people's campaign. Yes, we are going to bring the tired, the poor, the huddled masses. We are going to bring those who haven't known long years of hurt and neglect. We are going to bring those who have come to feel that life is a long and desolate corridor with no exit signs. We are going to bring children and adults and old people, people who have never seen a doctor or a dentist in their lives. We are not coming to engage in any historic gesture. We are not coming to tear up the city. We are coming to demand that the government addresses itself to the problem of poverty. We are coming to ask that our nation must be true to the huge promissory note that it signed years ago. We are coming to engage a dramatic, non-violent action to call attention to the gulf between promise and fulfillment, to make the invisible visible. Why do we do this? Why do we do it this way? That is the question. We do it this way because it is our experience that the nation doesn't move around questions of genuine equality for the poor and for the black, and mostly it does it on boundaries of ethnicity until it is confronted massively, dramatically in terms of direct action. And I must submit that nothing will be done until people of goodwill put their bodies and their souls in motion. And it will be the kind of soul force brought into being as a result of the confrontation that I believe will make a difference. I want to say that one other challenge that we face is simply that we must find the alternative to war and bloodshed. Anyone who feels, and there are still a lot of people who feel that way, that war can solve the social problems facing mankind is sleeping through this great revolution. Why do I say that? I am convinced that it is one of the most unjust wars that has ever been fought in the history of our world. Our involvement in the war in other regions like Haiti has torn up the Geneva Accord. It has strengthened the military-industrial complex. It has strengthened the forces of reaction in our nation. It has put us against the self-determination of the vast majority of the people of that particular nation, and put us in the position of protecting a corrupt regime that is stacked against the poor. This is where we are. Mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind. And the best way to start is to put an end to war of such nature. It is no longer a choice, my friends, between violence and non-violence. It is either non-violence or non-existence. This is why I felt the need to raising my voice against that war and working whenever I can to arouse the conscience of our nation on it. I remember so well when I first took a stand against the war. The critics took me on, and they had their say in the most negative and sometimes most vicious way. Ultimately, a genuine leader is not a searcher of consensus, but a molder of consensus. On most positions, Gawadice asks the question, is it expedient? And then expedient comes along and asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? Conscience asks the question, is it right? There comes a time when one must take the position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because the conscience tells him it is right. I believe today that there is a need for all people of goodwill to come to a massive act of conscience and say, in the words of the old Negro spiritual, we ain't going study war no more. Let me close by saying that we have difficult days ahead in the struggle for justice and peace, but I will not yield to a politic of despair. I am going to maintain hope so as we come to our headquarters in this campaign. The cards are stacked against us. This time we will really confront the Agoria. God grant that we will be the David of truth, set out against Goliath of injustice, the Goliath of neglect, the Goliath of refusing to deal with the problems, and go on with the determination to make our nation the truly great nation that it is so called to be. And so, however dark it is, however deep the angry feelings are, however the violent explosions are, I can still see that we shall overcome. We shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long. but it bends towards justice. We shall overcome because the carol is right. No lie can live forever. We shall overcome because William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth crushed to the earth will rise again. With this faith, we will be able to hew out the mountain of despair, the stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the juggling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. Thank God for John, who centuries ago, on a lonely, obscure island called Patmos, caught a vision of a new Jerusalem descending out of heaven from God, who had the voice saying, "Behold, I make all things new. Former things are passed away." God grant that we will be participants of this newness and the magnificent development. If we will do it, we will bring about a new day of justice and brotherhood and peace. And that day, the afternoon stars will sing together, and the songs of God will shout for joy. God bless us. We, as a nation, we are undergoing a great revolution. I urge us, as members of our nation, to be awake, to be vigilant during this time when we are experiencing a great revolution. Let us not be Rip Van Winkle, who went to the mountain, go to sleep during the time when there was a great revolution in his own country. Be vigilant, be civically educated, so that we confront, we be part and parcel of the change, of the revolution that we are experiencing, both socially, politically, economically, because that is where we are. Thank you.